Welcome to Talkin Science, where we dive into the stories making headlines in the world of science and space. I'm Matt Miller. Dr. Brad Tucker is here. Brad, happy Tuesday.
How's it going?
Really well, my friend. Let's get the headlines in this, the 39th week of 2021. Captain Kirk's off to space with an Aussie. A 4.2 magnitude quake was detected on Mars, and it was a doozy. And a new theory about the moon's formation.
This is Trekzone's Talkin Science. And you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes info and first-play access to all Trekzone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click join on every Trekzone video on YouTube. Go to the trek.zone/support or scan the QR code on screen throughout the show. Now, it's back to you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. And a quick mention of our socials. Trekzone's on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and your favourite podcast feed. Find us, like, follow, and subscribe. Leave comments and ratings. That'll help us convince the algorithm we're worth it. Brad, too, on social media, at BTucker22 on Twitter, and Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. Brad, I was planning Trekzone out for the rest of the year and discovered there's only 88 days left in the year. Twofold question. Do you think Victoria will be out of lockdown by then? The poor state has been holed up the longest anywhere in the world. And what about you guys in Canberra as well?
Canberra is expecting to start easing up from about 2 weeks' time as we have vaccination rates soaring. And right now, ACT, the idea is that we may actually hit 95% vaccination above 12, which is just going gangbusters. It is believed that we'll approach almost 100% for our year 11 and 12 students by next week.
Wow.
And they can go immediately back to school. So yeah, it's ACT is taken towards it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Victoria, I don't know.
Who knows about Victoria? Well, let's get into the show and give our Victorian audience something else to think about. First up in our headlines, tonight is the time a Russian actress and her director will ride a Soyuz to the space station.
Yeah, happening at 6:55 Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 5:55 p.m. Standard Time tonight. They'll head up for about a half a day, going to the space station. They'll spend about 12 days filming in space for the first proper Hollywood-esque movie filmed in space, beating Tom Cruise to it.
Absolutely. I do feel for Tom Cruise. He had the ambition and the determination as well, clinging onto aircraft and all the sorts of things. He could have tried a little harder to get to orbit, maybe.
He could, and I think it's still not over, right? SpaceX wanted to get that Inspiration 4 mission. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Tom Cruise head up next year. Maybe he'll stay up longer or something like that than the 12 days. Who knows? I don't think this is going to be the last movie, though, that we see filmed in space. Let's say that.
So long as nothing goes wrong.
That's true, right? If something goes terribly wrong, then it may be a different story. I hope for at least some comical mistakes. How do you get this astronaut as a random extra in the scene? You were in the shot again, Dimitri.
Jeez, Dimitri.
We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, Virgin Galactic, grounded by the US's Federal Aviation Administration a few weeks back, has been cleared to fly again, but they say they're not going to be getting up there until late next year.
Yeah, so, once they've gotten cleared, they still have this Italian flight that they want to get up, which they're still trying to get up soon. But yeah, they won't then resume regular operations until probably middle third quarter next year, as they said. And this is partially because they want to do upgrades their spacecraft for durability and equipment. And this was always part of the plan. This was always they were going to do these few first flights, including the one in July, and then kind of regroup to start full operations next year.
Well, Brad, Captain Kirk is heading into orbit, or at least his namesake, William Shatner, along with a former NASA engineer / Aussie and the founder of a clinical research platform, an eclectic mix, if you will. And we're going to be seeing their images coming up here on this overlay. But an eclectic mix heading up on the next Blue Origin flight.
Look, eclectic is one way to describe what's going to be like this flight. There were some rumors that came out a week or two ago that William Shatner was going to be on it. from the source of all space news, TMZ. And it appears to be true. And people started to believe it because last week Blue Origin announced that, yes, there was 2 people, including this Australian, but everyone was quick to point out, well, there's 6 seats. They should at least have 4, given they had 4 on their first flight last year. Who are the other 2? And Blue Origin overnight confirmed that indeed, not only will one of their vice presidents be on it, but yes, the king of space, the captain of space, William Shatner, will be going up.
I was listening to ABC News Radio a little earlier today, and they had a report from the BBC. Now, my Trekkie brain hurt because they got a couple of facts wrong on the Star Trek
Your
side of
worlds are
things.
colliding here, Matt.
I know, it's amazing. But it did hurt my brain that the BBC reporter couldn't get those Star Trek facts right. I can't remember what they are now. They're so insignificant, but it is incredible. And a former NASA engineer and entrepreneur, going to leave the pronunciation of his name to you. He served as a space mission architect and helped invent the PhoneSat, a satellite built out of a smartphone. He spent a lot of time developing missions for the space agency. Now he finally gets a chance to fly. His name, Brad, is, of course...
Chris Buzin, I think.
There we go.
Well, I apologize, Chris, if I mispronounced your name. But yeah, as you said, he also worked as the chief technology officer of Planet Labs, and a great company that is doing some amazing Earth observations things. So, he's very known in the space circles. He's worked in the space industry, he said, over a decade, coming from the University of Sydney. So it's great to see that, on this second flight, we're already getting an Australian up there, which is kind of cool, given it would only be 8 people, and one is William Shatner, so he doesn't really count as a person. He counts as something else.
Something larger than life.
Now, something larger. And then if you take into account Jeff Bezos' head, even, really, there's very few, it's a very small number of people who've made these first 2 flights. So well on him, Chris, for making it.
Absolutely. Well, De Vries says that he's spent his entire career working to extend people's lives, and now extending our reach into space can help humanity continue to thrive. As we've talked about, William Shatner at 90, he's going to become the oldest human to cross the Kármán line, Brad.
Which is interesting because, he beat Wally Funk, who was on that July flight, who was, I think, 87. She was part of the Mercury 13 group of female astronauts who tried to show that women can train and go into space and be prepared, who beat John Glenn, who was in his late 70s when he went up on the space shuttle, one of the first American, or the first American, to orbit the Earth. So definitely kind of this getting older in some way. I think the real challenge will be, can William Shatner get all of his quotes and lines in the short amount of time as he is in space done?
And is he going to be able to do his classic theatrical acting without the assistance of gravity? These are the questions.
I think this is going to be one of the most interesting storylines to watch. It's just, how does it unfold? I don't know what's better, the movie being filmed in space or an actor going into space to just be himself. So it will be interesting to see how it watched. And obviously, as we saw with Blue Origin's first flight, we can expect lots of vision and photos from the launch, them in orbit and coming back down. Whether this is even used for one of William Shatner's shows, some people believe that maybe it could be. So look, I think it's a little bit of fun. One of the big things that everyone has noticed is no one has disclosed how much they are paying, any of them. Virgin Galactic has quite clearly said what their price is. We talked about it last month when they raised it to $450,000 US. Blue Origin has said they sold about $100 million worth of seats, but how this is broken up. We know there was a charity auction that went for $28 million. There's a lot of these things that are unclear exactly how much is being spent, and how the selection process happens. Is it just because you're William Shatner and you get selected, which is fair? How does it all fit in? I think it's just kind of a little bit interesting as this new industry unfolds. How is this all playing out, and how will it keep playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should just mention Glenn De Vries. I just mentioned his last name just before. Glenn De Vries is on the mission as well. It lifts off next week, Brad. Not long to wait, not long to see whether the Shatner lines will be coming out. They have to. Surely it's part of his contract to fly on this mission to be William Shatner.
Exactly. As I said, like that's the only point you would get him for is to be William Shatner. If he just sits there and is boring, it will be the most disappointing flight ever. So as I said, I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think we'll see. I think the real question is, does he wear any special attire? Because that would put it up one notch. I imagine you'll stick to the Blue Origin suits. But when Jeff Bezos and his brother came back, they all wore cowboy hats because they're so naturally cowboys there. Will William Shatner change into something? Will he honor anyone in space? I think there's a few interesting things to watch out for. It's a little bit of fun.
Absolutely. And just one last point on this. Of course, he's not the first original series actor to head up to space. Jimmy Doohan's ashes were smuggled up to the space station back in the 2000s by a private astronaut. So they're up there, but he will be the first living Star Trek actor to head into space. And as you say, of course, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelly, Jimmy Doohan, of course, they are no longer with us. So definitely an opportunity to pay homage if indeed that's what he's going to do. Will be one to watch next Tuesday, Brad. But next up on our show, we're off to Mars, and the InSight lander has recorded a magnitude 4.5 quake that went on for a bit of time, Brad.
Yeah, we were talking about when the Victoria quake happened just before we recorded 2 weeks ago. That lasted about 20 to 30 seconds. Some of the bigger quakes can last maybe a minute here on Earth. I know some of the larger ones, but usually they're in the tens of seconds. This one, though, on Mars lasted for 90 minutes. Now, that is a pretty long time for a quake to go on.
It is. It absolutely is. Well, NASA described it as one of the biggest and longest lasting Mars quakes the mission has ever detected. So the fact that there's longer ones out there, the way that I read that is a little bit concerning. It's the third recorded in the past month, and it's a bit of proving that we may now only be finding out how geologically active the red planet is.
Yeah, InSight has detected hundreds, it may even be thousands now, of quakes on Mars. Most of them have been small, the magnitude 2s. I've seen a few magnitude 3s. There's been a lot of work on what is the source of the quakes. How does this understanding of the soil and the density, because how the waves propagate through the ground and how they move through the ground. There has been belief that Mars does have tectonic plates, but maybe they've either solidified or they've cooled down, so they're not moving as much. So is this an interplate pressure that's been released? Is this from plates colliding or moving as they do here on Earth along fault lines? Is this an entirely different mechanism? Because again, it's not just the intensity that they're seeing that's quite interesting, but as you said, the length that they're lasting for is just really surprising. And it is believed that there could be longer ones, as you said, out there. This has just been one that has been very conclusively determined that indeed it was a quake and not some other background noise or anything like that.
Not another mission shaking the ground for some soil.
That's right. Like that. Hey, shake your fist at curiosity, damn you. Curiosity, be quiet. I'm trying to listen.
Well, we have to remove our preconceptions about earthquakes, don't we, Brad? What do we know so far about Marsquakes?
Yeah, and so Marsquakes, they've believed to have a few different flavors. They've always believed that they should also detect some quakes from landing asteroids, for instance, that when asteroids hit the planet, as they do here on Earth or the moon, you would feel a little bit of rumbling there. They haven't felt that many of those. Most of the quakes have come from underneath, let's say, under the mantle. And as we talked about a few months ago, InSight has revealed that the layers of Mars are quite different than Earth. The core is much bigger than they thought. So there seems to be different mechanisms from those quakes, maybe not as the same as what we have here on Earth, but maybe they're still a similar mechanism. I mean, some most definitely are. There's kind of like two categories. There's some that we're calling Earth-like quakes and some that we're calling moon-like quakes. Now, the moon does have quakes as well, but this is more from surface tension, and it's actually believed due to gravitational forces from the Earth on the moon creating these quakes, kind of like you're squeezing the ball almost. So is it coming from the surface, or is it coming from underneath, more like Earth-like? And they definitely believe that they're detecting both of these on Mars.
It's interesting you mentioned the moon, Brad, because our last story this week is a new study suggesting the gigantic impact that created the moon was actually a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, look, this has been a big source of work really for decades, especially since the Apollo era, when the rocks and samples brought back from the moon revealed that the moon was a lot more similar to the Earth than they were expecting, composition, element ratio wise, those sorts of things. And so the longest time to explain the moon was from one massive impact we call Theia. So Theia is the name for a protoplanet, something about the size of Mars. It was not Mars, but something about that size that was forming, smashed into essentially the molten Earth, spilt out a whole bunch of rock. Eventually, that rock coalesced into the moon. Well, some aspects of the properties and dynamics of the moon didn't fully explain by a single impact, and some new modeling and calculations to show that maybe as you said, a two-punch system better explains the properties of the moon. And what we mean here is how it's tidally locked, i.e. one side facing us, the drifting, the composition, the density, all the sorts of things, and that it's a better fit for the creation of the moon.
And the interesting thing here is that 1-2 punch is a couple of million years apart.
Yeah, it wasn't like a boom boom thing that you really had the huge impact, and then a couple of million years later you get that second collision. And this is part of the key here is, a million years still sounds a long time, but it takes a long time for planets to start forming and coalescing and solidifying as they come together. And that's partially why this second collision a few million years later, when the moon starts to cool down but is not perfectly solid, because if it had completely solidified when the second collision happened, it just would have broken up again equally, and then you would have had essentially a ring system. But because it was still molten, it was still forming, it was able to reform into the shape and composition that we have of the moon. But there definitely is this now belief that it really probably was these two collisions, these said, spaced by a couple of million years.
And this likely wasn't just happening in our little neighborhood. It could have been a regular thing for the early solar system, Brad, especially those inner planets, those rocky planets, smashing into each other and just forming the 4 or 5 planets that we know today.
Yeah, we knew it was a really chaotic time in the solar system, that there was a bunch of protoplanets that had not quite formed. And there were some bigger planets. Earth was bigger because the moon came from us. So you have to really add up the moon and Earth here, plus a little bit of Theia that would have been thrown around. And so it was a really chaotic time. So maybe there were moons even of Venus that disappeared. Unlikely, but it's possible. Maybe Mars also had a moon before it captured Phobos and Deimos, Martian moons, which we believe are just captured asteroids. Maybe there was something else there. Maybe this also relates to the asteroid belt itself. There's a few of these different things that explain the very chaotic turmoil of the inner solar system, which we now, as we have shown a couple of times and talked about, as we start getting more and more data of other planetary systems where we get to see planets and moons forming in somewhat real time in their disks, helps us put a picture together of how these rocky planets and inner planets form, and not, as you said, just our solar system, but any solar system.
Absolutely. Well, Brad, Talkin' Science continues right up until the end of Trekzone's 2021 season. We're podcasting through to the 23rd of December this year and are on track to reach our 350 episode milestone at that point. It's a huge achievement, all done by myself with the awesome support of folks like you, Brad, who have been here for 141 episodes of Talkin' Science and a few specials as well since I added this show back in April 2019. And you can support us, get even better, tell even more cool stories, and get on the road once restrictions lift by becoming a member today. Get that warm and fuzzy feeling by supporting us. Click join on every Trekzone video on YouTube or go to the trek.zone/support. Brad, it's great to pick apart the stories of the week with you. We'll do it all again next week.
Sounds good.